Well, hello everyone. Welcome to a new season of Formula G. We are in season 3. My name is Zotomo, and I am the organizer this season, no longer a competitor. And I'm joined in this reveal show by Calamity. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Are you excited about another season of Formula G?
Somewhat, yes. Um, then I saw the map pool. We'll
Ah,
talk about that in a bit.
yeah. Yeah, Calamity returning to FGT Racing as he's been for the last 3 seasons. So yeah, let's just jump right into the rules to start off with, just to familiarize yourself with the competition. Formula G consists of 2 races every race week, a feature race and a sprint race. The feature race is on a country-wide map of the host country, 4 minutes per round, and the ability to move and zoom and everything, but no external clues and help, obviously. Top 10 drivers get points with a bonus point for the fastest 25K. And races take place between Friday and Wednesday GMT Standard Time. Sprint races are in a host city in the country of the feature race. And so drivers actually get different times based on their performances in the feature race. So if you do really well in the feature race, you get less time. And if you do poorly in the feature race, you get more time. This kind of helps try to even the field and give some other drivers a chance to earn some points, even if they can't do really well in the feature race, which always creates really interesting dynamics in the last couple of seasons. So been happy with that. Here's how the points are awarded. First place is 25, second place is 20, and then it drops off pretty sharply from there, with 10th place only getting a single point. So yeah, you do get points for being in the top 10, but you definitely want to be at least in that top 5 to get anything quite significant at all for that. And yeah, let's take a quick look at the race calendar. As you said, Calamity, you're not really too happy about this one, but other drivers have told me they're quite happy. But yeah, let's go through this one. We start off in Spain for our first race.
Yes, Spain is probably one of the countries that I usually like more out of this map pool, just because we've had a few months ago at this point, Orpheus had a tournament which was specifically, well, inspired by the, I think Vuelta is what it's called, the cycling competition through Spain. So I've practiced Spain quite a bit for that. I mean, I didn't really practice it much. It's just, I played a few seeds that were solely based in Spain.
Mm.
So I know quite a few of the provinces. But it's still like, even as one of the countries I like more out of this map pool, if I had like every country in the world, it's still not all that far up there.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but Madrid is gonna be an interesting one as well. I feel like I remember us having Madrid before as a sprint race.
It it
Um,
was it was in season 1. It was our like preseason race
that makes
was
sense.
Spain, so it was what gave us our initial lineups for week 1. So it wasn't actually part of
Okay,
the competition, but it was like kind of like a precursor, a preseason to it.
that's
So
that's why I remember it. I did
mhm,
badly there too, so
mhm,
maybe I can do better this time around.
mhm,
Um, yeah, we then go to Montenegro, which I've recently named my absolute worst country out of them all in GeoGuessr.
mhm,
Um, yes, I'm being serious, worse than like Indonesia, worse than Bangladesh, etc. Because the main reason why I hate Montenegro so much is that
mhm,
in every other country that exists in GeoGuessr, I always feel like, maybe behind the next corner there's a sign that's going to be useful. Maybe there's going to be something there. There's always that chance. That chance does not exist in Montenegro. There are
mm,
no helpful signs. They just simply don't exist. So it's always just been very, very frustrating for me to play as a country, because
mm,
if you spawn like in the middle of nowhere, then you know you're not going to find anything for like 10 minutes. So it kind of feels like, what's even the point?
mm,
But maybe Podgorica will be interesting at least. It is, I think, a very interesting city to play for a sprint race, because I don't think it's got too much in the way of information that's going to tell you, hey, you're here or there. But
mm.
it's not the biggest city.
Yeah.
So maybe it's actually quite decent to practice, where you can just sort of get familiar with certain roads, maybe, I don't know, specific points of interest where you're like, hey, this stadium I recognize, or this bridge, because there is also a river going through the middle of it. So that could be a very interesting city to play, and I hope you choose a good time limit for it. I don't know what a good time limit will be, but I think that'll heavily depend on the time limit, how enjoyable it's going to be.
Yeah.
Then we move over to the US again, and yeah, not the biggest fan of the US here, but I did have the fastest 25K in the US I've ever done in the feature race. I think it was it last season or was it season one?
Yeah.
Yeah, season one. Which was, I think it was either like 7 or 9 minutes back then. So I've got good memories of it in Formula G at least. Let's hope that these memories don't get ruined in week 3. Then we've got Philadelphia as a sprint race, which, to be honest, for me, I don't really know how that's going to play. You do have, in typical US fashion, numbered streets, which are like broken up though with some, named streets in between. So again, another city I think that could be relatively interesting depending on the time limit. And depending on the locations chosen as well. Of course, that kind of goes for all the maps
Yeah,
you
always.
have in the sprint race.
Yeah.
Yep. Then we're moving over to South America in Chile, which I think is a relatively interesting map too. Again, yeah, depending on the locations you get. You want to say something?
I think Chile is really interesting because I love their road numbering system. So even their smaller roads are numbered quite logically. So if you can find information, it's actually not hard to find it on the map. But of course, you could be in the middle of nowhere and not see a sign. But
yeah,
again, it always comes down to if you get a sign, Chile can be a really fun country. It was the first country I ever got gold in on the Explorer mode. Because I was always just shy of that was it
22.5K.
Yeah, 22.5K or something like that. So I was always shy, but Chile, I almost aced completely because of those road numbers on a very lucky seed. So it's got a good place in my heart for sure. And yeah, Santiago will be a good sprint race, I think, for that.
Yeah, I do also remember playing Santiago for something before, and I think I did fairly well, but it's not really a city that's gonna be nice in terms of the information it gives you. And it is a pretty large city as well. So that's definitely something interesting. We always have that kind of thing in sprint races. Sometimes, like, everyone gets the 25K, it feels like. Sometimes it's really difficult. I feel like Santiago might be more on the difficult side. But it's then, because of that, one of those cities where you can actually really make a difference, and it doesn't come down to, hey, he was 3 meters closer, therefore he's 7 places above me. Bit, over exaggerated, of course, but you know what I mean. And then we move over to a country with a very similar flag to Chile, which is Taiwan. Taiwan also relatively well signed, in the sense that you usually have lots of signs for roads, as long as you're not like in a very suburban area where you've just got lots of streets and none of them really are actually numbered streets, but just small named streets. The road numbering system in general is also sort of ordered, not very well ordered, but it shouldn't, especially in 4 minutes. I think if you find a sign early on for a road, you should be able to find it. But of course, pinpointing could be a bit of a challenge depending on the locations we get, and that is definitely also true for Taipei. Out of curiosity, Taipei does not include New Taipei, does it?
No, it'll be it's not the big metropolitan huge area. I think it's pretty limited.
Just
map,
Taipei.
So,
yeah. Taipei definitely could be. I think if you find your way to a main road quickly, it could be a relatively easy city to play. But of course, as always, you can get stuck in some suburbs. But the good thing, I think, at least, is that the main roads are kind of in a grid system, at least somewhat. So if you just keep going in one direction, you usually hit a main road eventually. Then it's just, again, a matter of time, how much time you've got left. And maybe I think definitely worth about like spending 15 minutes beforehand to just look at, okay, what are the main streets called? So that you don't have to like zoom in into every street to check your name. But it could be an interesting one. Then Oh, do
Belgium.
you want to say something? Yeah,
Yeah. No, I
Belgium.
think yeah, Taiwan is really fun, and it's I think I was really happy when we got a random draw in our China Asian seed that
Hmm.
came up Taiwan. I was like, ooh, this will be really interesting because yeah, just really packed, kind of almost dense cities, but then
Hmm.
also you can get stuck in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, so it can throw
Yeah,
you all sorts
Taiwan.
of things. So
Taiwan is kind of the one of those countries that has very distinct different areas, but the areas themselves are relatively large. Where you've got like the west coast,
yeah,
it
yeah.
all kind of looks the same, but it looks completely different from the center, which is very mountainous, and it looks completely different from the east coast. So at least you've got somewhat of an idea where you
Mhm.
could be, but even then, you've got a massive area to search for.
Yep.
But yeah, Belgium,
Belgium.
which is another one of those countries. Oh, Belgium is more so a country I used to hate. I've kind of been like, I've made peace with it somewhat. It's okay. I still don't like the Dutch speaking part of it, but the French speaking part of it is kind of fine. And it's another country that will heavily depend on the locations. Like
Mhm.
you can get some really, really rural locations in Belgium where you're just almost not
Mhm.
going to find anything in 4 minutes. And then you can also get some relatively urban locations where it's going to be completely fine. Um, and then you've chose Antwerp for the sprint race, which is also another interesting one. It's got a fairly large river going through it on
Mhm.
the western side. So I'm assuming it's just going to be a case of, hey, try to go west,
Yeah,
see how long it takes you to reach the river.
and
Um,
then count backwards from there.
yep.
Yeah.
So it could be another interesting one for sure. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Then.
Yeah, Bulgaria, I think, will be a really interesting one. Belgium definitely has those different language regions, but I mean,
Mm,
Bulgaria, I other than some geography, yeah, a good practice at reading the Cyrillic alphabet here. So,
yep. I am by now at a point where I can pretty much read Cyrillic
mhm.
without any major problems. I might still not know like the odd letter here or there, but other than that, I should be fine. My main problem with Bulgaria is just if you're in the middle of nowhere in a rural location, maybe you won't even need to read Cyrillic because you're not going to find a sign anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's not like it's kind of similar to a country like Belgium as well, where you do have kind of similar landscapes, maybe less so Belgium actually. I was just looking for a example that we've got here, but
Mhm.
more so if people can maybe remember from Reddit League, Romania,
Mm.
where you've got sort of mountain ranges going through the country and you've got more flat areas, but it's just kind of all over. So just because you're in a flat area, you don't really know where in the country you are. You just know you're not in one of the mountains parts,
Mhm.
and vice versa as well. So I think like just rural location Bulgaria is really difficult to find. So I hope for like at least a nice seed. Um, and then I think Sofia is probably if you're talking like Cyrillic speaking capital cities, probably one of the easier ones I think. It's usually decently signed at least, and it's not the biggest city. It kind of depends on. Let me actually what kind of border do you use for the cities? Do you use the one on Google Maps
Yeah,
if you
that's
type
kind
in?
of what we do is for the
All
sprint
right.
race. When you type in Sophia on Google, it'll give you the border, and I do make sure that all the points are within that
Yep.
border. So,
Well, let me retract my previous statements then. The border of Sofia on Google Maps is absolutely massive. Um,
yeah.
and that could be very interesting as well because there's a lot of like suburban areas of Sofia
Mhm.
where it's quite likely that you're just not going to find any major streets. So it definitely could be a map where practice might benefit you a
Mhm.
lot. It's definitely going to be an interesting one too.
Yeah,
Then
I
we
mean,
move.
yeah,
Okay, yep, go on.
I do randomly generate the locations and then pick ones that are acceptable because we don't want to be like, 5 minutes from nowhere for that. But yeah, there is a bit of randomness to the locations, and then but also a little bit of just ensuring that it will make
Mm,
for a good competition. But I don't curate things very much at all. So yeah,
yeah.
definitely you could get a random location in the middle of nowhere, or we could get four locations pretty much downtown, and it will be a nice little kind of jaunt through the city. So we'll see.
Yeah. I like that. I've always kind of, I don't want to say I've had a problem with it, but I wasn't really the biggest fan of having like recognizable like features
Landmarks,
at the
yeah.
starting points. Yeah, landmarks, kind of like that. Like big, I don't know, features that, if you typed in Sophia on Google, you'd find within 2 seconds.
Mhm.
Um, that was always kind of like my dislike for sprint races. But yeah, I much prefer just having random locations. And I mean, if you travel for 2 minutes in a big city, you're probably still going to find a landmark, but at
Mhm.
least then you have the task of actually backtracking and pinpointing where you started, rather than just going, oh, hey, here's the Colosseum in Rome. I know where that is.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. But yeah, we then move over to England. And
Which nobody likes.
yep, include
Yeah.
me in that.
Yeah. No,
I think, yeah,
a rough
England can
one
be
for
very
sure.
England can be very hit or miss. I think if you're in
Mhm.
in at least a town, a bigger town or a smaller city, then it's fine because you usually find decent signs that are like, hey, go there to, I don't know, a bigger city, or at least you find a road number. But in very rural areas, it's completely
Not.
possible that you're just
Yeah.
not going to find anything in 4 minutes. So I hope we don't get too many of those. Or if we do, then I hope that I'll find them. Um, but yeah, we then have Manchester as our sprint race. I think the last time we had London as a sprint race for the UK, which I
I don't
think, if
remember.
I remember right, was that season one as well
Yeah,
still? Yeah.
season one, Ben picked a lot of like real Formula One countries and tracks cities. So
Wait,
that's
did
kind
we?
of
No,
yeah.
we I just remembered because you said that we definitely had Milton Keynes.
Yeah, we did have
Um,
Milton Keynes. Yeah. Now that I'm
so I
looking at
must,
the
yeah, I
at
must
my
have just had,
graphics here from season one.
yeah, we must have had a location in a feature race in London. That's what I remember. But yeah, we had Milton Keynes, which I quite liked actually.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Manchester's definitely going to be very different from Milton Keynes, but again, we've got a couple of rivers going through the city, so that might help a bit. Um, and it's not too suburban, I guess. Let me type in Manchester. How big are the city borders? Manchester actually doesn't show you city borders, so depends on what you
Oh,
choose.
interesting. I'll have to look at that.
Yep. If you're gonna
Mhm.
choose the M60 as a border, that's gonna be very interesting. And it kind of depends. You could choose like a more centralized location as well. But yeah, could be interesting. Then we move over to Mexico, and Mexico is probably again one of the countries I actually like more out of this selection. But again, Mexico is still kind of a country like England where you can get rural locations and you're just not going to find anything at all,
Mhm.
which can be quite annoying. But other than that, usually it's, if you're on a main road, it's usually decently signed
Yeah.
and shouldn't be too much of a problem. And it's also, at least you've got a pretty clear distinction between like north and more central and eastern Mexico in terms of the landscape. And then we're gonna have Guadalajara as
Mhm.
the sprint race, um,
Because
because you,
Mexico City is horrible, so at least I didn't pick that.
yep,
So, yeah.
that's quite nice. I mean, you you probably could do Mexico City as a sprint race as well, but if you're gonna set the
Yeah.
time limit to like 2 minutes, then you can probably expect that no one will find anything.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, Guadalajara is still a very big city,
Mhm.
so I think it's definitely going to be an interesting sprint seat too. I've actually don't think I've ever really looked at Guadalajara.
Yeah,
Let me look for
I
a
figured it was
second.
an interesting alternative to Mexico City as a
Yeah.
major city in Mexico that players maybe haven't tried in
Hmm.
isolation. So,
It does have street names as well
mhm.
on the sides of buildings, which is very nice. Let me just check the board.
Yeah, there's a
Gotta be
major
careful.
train going to the city. There are a couple highways that
Okay,
pop in and out. So,
the border to Guadalajara is good. It's not too massive. Probably in a way that you might still struggle if the time limit's short. You might
mhm.
still struggle to find a street you are looking for, even if find a street name relatively early. But if you practice a bit, down a major road should be a fairly fun sprint seat to play. And then we finish off in Israel, which is
Mm.
another country I don't like. Though to be more precise, in Israel, I specifically don't like the cities. I'm fine with everything that's a bit more rural.
Yeah, that is
Um,
true. Mm.
But mainly like the Tel Aviv Netanya area is just awful. And I hope we have little locations there. As I'm saying that, I see that the sprint race is in Tel Aviv. So, right. I'm.
Well, you do
I
have to
just,
remember
yeah.
that, like, just kind of like Guadalajara, Tel Aviv is a huge metropolitan area, and the actual size of the city itself is a little bit
Yeah,
smaller.
true, true.
So you won't have to worry about like that huge metropolitan sprawl that could be way out there. But it's pretty
Yeah,
much just from the coast to the highway is pretty much the entirety of the city. So
yeah, it might.
it's not very wide. It's very long, which I think will be
Mm,
interesting to throw at players. So
might not be too bad to
mhm.
play. But yeah, I just hope I finish like very high up in the Mexico feature race. So it does. I'll be at like with a very short limits in Tel Aviv anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. That's my hope.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, it could be another interesting race to finish up as well. Overall, I think it's a fairly difficult, you know, draw of maps,
Mhm.
and there's not really one single map I see in there where you're like, okay, everyone's going to 25k that anyway, and it's just going to come down to meters. So
Mhm.
definitely an interesting map pool, if not one that I particularly like.
Yeah, like I did randomize the seeds from different map pools, and this is one of them that I got. And when I looked at this group of maps, I saw maps that were familiar to a lot of players, Chile, Spain, United States, England. But countries where you're gonna have a hard time getting, like you said, getting to 25k, which means it'll help us differentiate the better players from some of the more average players. We're not gonna have a big cluster at the top. And the combination of cities that I picked to go along with them, I feel like is a good balance between very practicable cities that you can get a feel for, that the roads are nicely laid out in
Mm,
some respect, well labeled, versus cities that are going to be a little bit more challenging. And you could definitely get lost in some small side streets in some of these for sure. So
mm,
I feel like it's going to be a challenging season, but one that's really going to show us who put in the practice, who really, you know, learned these capital cities or sort of near capital cities for some of them.
mm.
So yeah, I think it'll be a very interesting lineup. I'm really excited to see how everybody does in the coming season for sure. Well, let's take a look then now at all the teams. So the top driver from every team got to stay in their seat, but they had a new teammate, and actually most of the drivers got to pick their teammate based on the preseason results. So let's go through them one by one. We're going to start with good old Lancaster PR Racing. Yeah, they won season one with Simi as a driver, but since then have kind of been out of form. And their two drivers this season, Calamity, are Wakelock and M. Wickholm.
Yeah, they got really lucky at the end there that they just managed to cling on to second last, 1 point ahead of last, which was Octane last season. Um, Last season the lineup was still Simi, who didn't really take it all too seriously, I guess, finishing 21st, and Wakelock, who finished 15th last season. The Wakelock only actually scored points in 4 out of 20 races. In those races, they scored big, although I think it was, let me check. It was 3 sprint races where he scored most of his points, only
Mm.
scored once in a feature race. Then M. Wickholm, who was also here last season, back then driving for Casa Rivazza, goes over to Lancaster and probably fits well into the team in terms of the position that they had last season, because he finished 22nd, um, only scoring points in 3 races. So Lancaster definitely, definitely not going back to former glory, I think, from their season one performance. They're gonna have their hands full trying to not finish last, but it's a goal to go for, finishing 11th.
Yeah, I definitely think that this team is looking at kind of a mid-level performance, and will just be hoping to not be at the bottom of this one and just survive another season. And but I definitely would be wary, especially of Wakelock. He does have the ability to take some podiums, especially in some of the more difficult races, or in some even sprint races, as you mentioned, like last season. He did have a podium, a win last
Yeah,
season, right?
He did
Yeah,
win Florence
yeah.
last
So
season.
yeah, with Italians in the lineups, so he
Yeah.
did pretty well. So definitely look at him as at least for an individual performance, definitely can do very well for himself in that one. Our next team is Chariot, who actually had a very nice season last year. Moist Flubber is returning driver, and Pluki, number one driver from qualifying, takes the second seat in this one.
Yeah, this is definitely a very interesting driver lineup to look forward to. Moist Flubber, as you said, pretty decent season last time around, finished fifth, but only 16 points behind Mr. Blue in second. So definitely a candidate for another good placement. And as you said, Pluki winning the preseason. So I definitely think that Chariot has got what it takes here in this driver lineup, even though they lost Barry, who still did very well last season, finishing seventh. I think Pluki is more than capable of replacing him and, well, getting Chariot to another second place finish or maybe even challenge Nordhagen for that first place.
Yeah, I definitely think that this lineup is worthy of challenging for the top of the constructor challenge. I wouldn't say that these two drivers have a shot at being in the top one or two of the individual driver championship, but the team as a whole definitely very strong and can give any other team a good run for their money. Bamberg, the German team, will see the return of Jack ES, who has really established himself in this competition, always does well. But his teammate has always been a bit of a problem for him the last few seasons. He picks up Solar Sensei in this one, Calamity.
Yeah, and Jack as well has mostly been a player who's done really well in the sprint races too. Just if you look at his last season performances, he won the sprint race in week 3. He finished second, I think, in the sprint race in week 6. He finished third in the sprint race in week 8. Won the sprint race in week 9 and finished second in the sprint race in week 10. So the majority of his points came from sprint races. Feature races were a lot more up and down, probably more so in mid-table performances. But those sprint races were what brought him into fourth place in the overall standings.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, his teammate last season, Slovakoli, no points. So definitely can't really call him lucky in terms of his teammate. And well, he'll definitely hope that Sola Sensei will, get a few more points at least for him and his team this season. And yeah, I definitely do think they're a team I would probably put around the fourth to fifth place category. It'll depend a bit again on if where whether Jack can repeat those great sprint race performances and maybe can even step up in some feature races, and how Solo Sensei does. But yeah, I think fourth to fifth is around where I would expect them.
Good. Moving on to your team then, Calamity. A bit unfortunate last season to lose Einarglu due to other kind of contract troubles. He didn't really finish the season, so you had to kind of carry the weight for your team all by yourself. But you are joined by fellow countryman Clemens this time around, and so you'll be looking to hope that that countryman kind of camaraderie carries FGT to a little bit higher place in the standings.
Yeah, I haven't had the strongest teammates over a whole season so far with Envicom in season 1, who of course did his best, but and then Einarglu, kind of having to cancel out on the season midway through. I think I did pretty decently last season. Ended up in ninth place, scored over 100 points, barely. I think my main problem I had was I was very consistent, but the high finishes were pretty rare. I managed to win a sprint race and come third once, but a lot of finishes lower down in the points. I finished, I think that would be sixth 3 times, finished eighth once, finished ninth 3 times, and finished 10th once. So a lot of point scoring finishes, but very low down, so not getting all that rewarded for it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, with Clemens on my side, I hope he can sort of, get. I think if he gets about more points than Einarklu managed last season, where he only played half the season, I'll be happy with him. But maybe he can surprise me as well. Maybe he'll win it. I don't think so, but yeah, if he at least plays the full season and does decently, I'll be satisfied. And as a team, I think it might be difficult with some of the newcomers coming in, depending, of course, of how seriously people will take the competition. But I think if we can repeat sixth place from last season as FGT Racing, I'll be happy. It's going to be difficult enough, but we'll see. Personally, for myself, I just want a couple of podium finishes. Maybe I can get a win again. I think that was in Japan last season, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. Yes. Unfortunately, no Japan this season, but I'll try my best. Maybe I can win something.
Good. And moving over to Nordhawkin, which was the champion last season in season 2, and really big shakeup here, losing their championship driver Boxa to a rival. So Max Fi is keeping his seat, and he is joined by one of the kind of lesser known newcomers, and I don't even know how to pronounce his name, Colin Gither. Colin Gither.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah.
Let's. I would assume it's Colin Ginter, but
Ah, there we go. Yeah, but when you don't put a space in your name, it makes it really hard to know what to say.
yeah, it's maybe he can correct this and
Mhm.
tell us how it actually is. But that's the only thing I can think of that sort of makes sense.
Mhm.
But yeah, Boxer left on his own and decided he wants to drive for a German team. So it'll definitely be difficult to almost impossible for Nordhagen to repeat their championship from last season. Max did still finish decently, finished sixth last season, and had 3 race wins actually, and an additional 2 podiums. So definitely had some standout performances, but also had his dry spells in some weeks. So probably depending on how much he likes the maps this season, he could do really well or just sort of average. And yeah, I don't really know. I'm just going to call him Colin for now.
Mhm.
I don't really know him well. I haven't seen him before, but he did apparently finish in the top 12 in the preseason. So he's got the potential to at least get some points. And how many that will be, we'll see during the course of the season.
Yeah, he had pretty decent finishes in the qualifying, so we'll definitely see how things shape up for them this season. Going on to Scanstrom, and they lose Tall Impala, who just decides to retire from competition as of right now. Orpheus keeps his seat, but the really fun thing is that he picks up another Frenchman, well, sort of, in Hidekmi for his teammate. But Hidekmi has decided he wants to fly the Antarctic flag just to represent the research France does down there, I guess. So yeah, even though his flag won't be it, 2 Frenchmen taking the seats here.
Yeah, and Scanstrom have always kind of been a upper mid-table team. They finished in third place last season, with Orpheus doing the brunt of the work in third place in the individual standings, with Tor finishing 11th. Hedekmi is definitely capable of, at least getting as many points as Tor did last season, which was 69. And whether they can challenge for anything more will heavily depend on whether Hedekmi can pick up more points than that. Because as always, it's going to be very difficult to beat the next team that we're going to take a look at.
Mhm.
But I definitely think they can fight at least for top 3 again. I think Chariot might also be a candidate who might be difficult to beat. But yeah, you never really know at the start of a Formula G season. A lot of things could happen.
Mhm. Yeah, and definitely the next team on our list is Oberhausen, and they made big offseason changes. Really, the surprise stealing native Boxa, German, wanted to be on a German team, and they definitely were not going to pass that opportunity up to try to get another title after taking season 1 with Simi. Yeah, so that means that Barry Fishy Bear is also the one that is selected from Chariot. So they take 2 really good drivers from different teams, bring them together to hope to recreate some magic here in season 3, which sees M the Basement and Close lose out their seats, unfortunately, in Oberhausen.
Yeah, and that is a massive change, and obviously immediately puts Oberhausen into the favorite of the competition, especially as Boxer almost could have won the Constructors' Championship on his own last season. He
Mhm.
only had 28 points less than second place Chariot Motor Group as a team of 2. We'll see if his performances will be as good as last season this time around. We did see that if the map's not to his liking, if the country is not for him, then he can also struggle. He only picked up a total of 14 points in the last 2 weeks of last season. Although at that stage, obviously, it had pretty much been decided that he was going to win anyway. So I don't know how much practice he put into that. But yeah, I think it'd be a big surprise if any team could maybe even challenge Oberhausen for that first spot in the Constructors' Championship.
Moving on to Casa Rivazza, and yeah, Mr. Blue obviously keeps his seat after a pretty decent performance. He was second overall in the Drivers' Championship last season, and he is joined by a good friend off the track in Carp, a new driver coming up through the ranks in Formula G, and so he's really kind of betting that some of that off track chemistry is going to help boost this team's chances of actually picking up a constructors championship.
Yeah, and Mr. Blue finished second last season in individual standings and had Mwicom as a teammate down in 22nd. So we've now Carp instead of Mwicom. Carp finished 13th last season. I definitely think they've got a decent chance to fight for that top three as well, maybe be around the same area as Skanström will be. And yeah, I do think Carp had a very up and down season as well last season. He finished in the top five 4 times, but apart from that, did not have a single top 8 finish. Essentially, he had a couple more 10th and one more 9th place. So very, very up and down for him. And it'll just depend on whether he can get a bit more consistency in there. Maybe the countries will be more to his liking, who knows? But yeah, definitely a candidate for. I would say actually, if Carp and Mr. Blue, if they do well, then they're a candidate for that third place fight. If they do poorly, then FGT Racing might be in there with a fight.
Very nice. Octane Engineering is our next team, and there is a big shakeup as well in this American team. Me obviously leaving for taking on the kind of managerial role for all of Formula G, and Stilis Nick retiring. These two new drivers, and they could do worse, Calamity. They pick up M the Basement and Shumi Obolosa as their contracts expire with their previous teams. And actually gives them a decent lineup for the first time, maybe in their entire history.
Yeah, for some reason, for me, M the Basement and Shumi Obolosa feels like a familiar team. I don't know. Do you remember who they were? Were they driving together in season 1? Because for some reason, I feel like they've been together before. And yeah, both of them had a pretty rough last season, finishing in 18th and 19th in the table. And yeah, they'll both just hope to do better than that. Shumi was kind of very up and down, where he had 3 top 5 finishes, and apart from that, he was 10th once, and that was his best result otherwise. Kind of similar to Wakelock in a way. So if he can get a bit more consistency in there, that would be great for him. And the Basement more so. I mean, he did finish second once, but other than that, a couple of point finishes, more so in like the lower mid table. And he as well, he can do better than that. It just kind of depends on how seriously he takes the games, if he does any practice for it whatsoever. And yeah, again, as I've always said, how much he likes the maps that were chosen.
Yeah, no, they haven't been a team together. And the Basement was on Oberhausen last season and Katzervatsa the season before that with Mr. Blue. So they haven't teamed up, but yeah, 2 veterans in Formula G. Looking to give Octane their first real shot at any kind of a constructors challenge race in this one. Moving to Opava, another team that has generally struggled at the bottom of the table. They have a pretty decent pair in Ordboka and a new rookie driver coming to the system this time in Pisanco from Italy. So we do still have an Italian driver after Stilis Nick leaves. My horrible Italian accent aside. For this one. But yeah, just basically trying to get out of the bottom 3 here, Calamity.
Yeah, Ordboka 14th last season and was joined last season by Shumi, who, as we just said, 19th. So if Pisa Nico, which I assume is his name, Pisa for the city in Italy and Nico for his name, gonna make an assumption here, might be correct. If he can, do a bit better than Shumi, they might be, in a position where they can at least fight for, maybe ninth, maybe eighth place. I don't think they're going to be much of a challenge for like the top places, but if they can fight for, maybe if they do really well, maybe they can sneak into the top half if they're lucky. But more so a team that will look to establish themselves, maybe give Pisa Nico a bit of experience on the competitive scene because he's still relatively new to it, and maybe then take another step towards getting further up in the table for the coming seasons.
Very nice. Orient Racing, a new team last season, one of the two expansion teams, has a pretty decent lineup this season around. Xander keeps his seat with Blacker being the new one to come in. Looking to build off not a bad season, but kind of mid-table and see if they can improve on that.
Yeah, Sander didn't do badly last season. He finished 8th, just 2 points ahead of me. So a pretty decent season from him. But Danny Blondes, as a teammate, only picked up 4 points over the course of the whole season. So wasn't really much help. And that meant that they still finished in 8th, actually, mostly due to Barry's points, which was not bad. But definitely with a more with a teammate who's going to add more points onto that as well. Probably looking to improve, similarly to Opava, maybe looking to fight for that upper table position.
And our final team is Cape Motorsport Carp, having moved on to a different team. Sees Laban Greb keep his seat, and newcomer Lunacy Echo joins the team. Again, a team who's going to look to improve on their last season performance and just stay in that middle of the pack for that kind of best of the rest kind of competition.
Yeah, Laban Greb finished 10th last season, so pretty mid-table. He was another very interesting one who finished in the top 4 times. Then he finished 9th 4 times, and everything else was outside of the points. So a very curious season for him. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they can do. I know Lunacy is a very good player. But I think they're another candidate for that sort of fighting for maybe they can sneak into 6th place area. Around that is where I would expect them to be.
Nice. Well, that wraps up our main drivers, but there is a Formula G2 competition going on this season, and they're fighting for seats next season in season 4. So the best drivers in this kind of secondary competition will be given automatic seats as they prove themselves throughout the season, driving right alongside their first team competitors. And we'll take a look at these just kind of in one big group here, Calamity. Ben Savage, the former organizer, we see him moving down into a driver's role as the academy driver for Lancaster. Connor joins Chariot Motor Group, DHZ with Bamberg, Croix with Scantrum, Campe with Octane, Renata in Opava, and Ankau in Orient. So a pretty interesting lineup, some pretty good scores across the board from these players in the preseason. So definitely looking to see how they will do and if they can earn themselves a spot next season in Formula One. Anybody who stands out in particular from this list based on their qualification performances?
I don't really remember their qualification performances, but I think it's mostly a case of if I look at these names, maybe there's potential there, but it makes sense why they didn't get chosen yet this season. But over the course of a whole season in G2, maybe they can improve themselves and get to a level where the teams in Formula G want them, and it's definitely good practice for them as well if they play alongside. And I don't know, do they get the same seed or a different seed as the Formula G drivers?
It's a different seed.
Okay.
But it is the same country with the same time, and there's no sprint race for them. So there's just one feature race that they'll be practicing. But yeah, the idea of this is just like any academy system in real life. It's a chance for them to play under real competitive kind of conditions so that they can get used to working with a time limit and just seeing how they can do compared to the other drivers. And also it gives them a chance to show off what they can do over a longer period of time. So maybe the qualifications were not the best maps for them, but they can put up some very strong performances in some of these maps. And so when teams look at them come next season, they'll be able to better judge their performance, having already shown glimpses of what they can do in qualification this season. So looking forward to see how they can do in that one. Well, yeah, that'll wrap up our show. It kind of happened to be longer than we thought it would be, but lots to talk about, lots of drivers, really interesting team changes. And so I can't wait to get into this one, Calamity. The Constructor Challenge will be just as interesting, I think, as ever. And, you know, maybe Boxer runs away with this again, but, you know, the likes of Mr. Blue and Jack and Orpheus are not going to want that to happen. And you might even have a say in this as well, to try to claim a spot or two from your 9th place finish this season. So
I'll give it a try. As I said, the countries aren't really to my liking, but I'll do my best. Maybe not really for a big improvement in the individual standings, but I'll try to, you know, in the countries or cities that I'm more comfortable with, I'll try to take the odd win or podium place off some of the favorites here or there.
Great. Well, thank you all for watching this. Formula G Season 3 has already started, so our drivers are already out there showing their stuff, so you can definitely look forward to more of these videos coming in the future. So if you like this video and want to follow the competition, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything, and definitely go back and watch Season 2. You can catch up on how the drivers did and try to follow them and see what you can expect from this season coming up. And we'll see you all there. Take care.
Bye.